bad Nazis are fighting bad Russians, then who are the baddies? And if bad Nazis are definitely bad, why are Facebook not banning the bad Nazis no more? Hello there, you 5.2 million awakening wonders. Here we journey together, avoiding the censorship, avoiding the numbing discourse of those that would mendaciously seek to control our conversation. We're going to be talking today about the complexity, the ongoing complexity of the horrific war in Ukraine, because there are factions within Ukraine that are neo-Nazi. Obviously, Putin's invasion is bad. War is bad. What's happening in Ukraine is horrific. Please, God, allow Ukrainian people's suffering to end. Please, God, allow us to find a world in which there is less war, less suffering. Wouldn't no war be nice? But we're going to, I think, in order to achieve this, have to look at the actual real complexity of geopolitics and military action and the historical complications of Ukraine and the reality that there are neo-Nazi combatants involved. We're going to get into that in a moment. First of all, I want to let you know that I'm touring the UK. So if you want to come and see me in Newcastle, Carlisle, Plymouth, Bristol, Glasgow for a fantastic show, it's more than a show now, more than just stand-up comedy. I even do stuff like meditation and breath work. If you want to come, there's a link in the description. Come see me. Be part of this. It's necessary for us to awaken together. But for now, let's just focus on one facet of this complexity. Nazis, or as they're now known, allies? I mean, let's break this down. So this is from The Intercept. Facebook will temporarily allow its billions of users to praise the Azov Battalion, a Ukrainian neo-Nazi military unit previously banned from being freely discussed under the company's dangerous individuals and organisation policy. They used to be banned because they're Nazis. So I don't know how you feel about that. Maybe you're so into free speech and stuff that you're like, I think Nazis should be allowed to speak. You know, like Yanis Varoufakis came on my podcast and he said Golden Dawn, a Nazi group, far-right Nazi group in his country, Greece, got elected. They weren't the main party in Greece, but they had some representatives because they were elected in parliament. He goes, but ultimately Syriza, who were a more left-wing party, prevailed. That's democracy, he argued. You let me know whether you think that Nazis should have the right to. I don't. Personally, let me just be clear, because you might read differently elsewhere in The Independent, that I'm a Nazi. And The Independent, of course, are 50% owned by the Saudi state. So there's no doubt or complexity about their morality. So if Nazis are bad and we're banning Nazis, then what's going on now that we're not banning Nazis? Because there are no consistent values or principles like compassion, kindness, tolerance, allowance of people to communicate freely, allow democratic discourse to take place and allow people to collectively come to conclusions. Because there's nothing like that, just control. They will snake through any argument in order to reach the objective they require. So one minute, Nazis bad, ban Nazis. Next minute, Nazis good. Allow Nazis because the Nazis are helpful when it comes to meeting our agenda. I don't even mean military and political agenda. I mean narrative agenda. The policy shift is pegged to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine and preceding military escalations. The Azov Battalion, which functions as an armed wing of the broader Ukrainian white nationalist Azov movement, began as a volunteer anti-Russia militia before formally joining the Ukrainian National Guard in 2014. Now, even white nationalism is often a response to the sense of ongoing external threat, which doubtless Ukraine has consistently felt because of its powerful neighbours, Russia, its former colonial overlord, and the pressure from NATO and the West. You can see how that might lead to a kind of nationalism. And given the ethnic history of the region, it would by default be white nationalism. So even that is bloody complicated. The regiment is known for its hardcore right-wing ultra-nationalism and the neo-Nazi ideology pervasive among its members. Facebook's blunt list-based approach to moderation puts the company in a bind. What happens when a group you've deemed too dangerous to freely discuss is defending its country against a full-scale assault? Complicated, isn't it? Complicated. What does complication require? Conversation. Explaining is not condoning. This is a conversation. Why? Because we are collectively trying to understand. With my personal acknowledgement, I don't know what's best. I'm not saying, here's the conclusion, here's the solution. I'm inviting you because I respect you, because I care about what you think, because I recognise you might know things that I don't know. And collectively, we might arrive at a place that will be impossible individually. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm acknowledging this is a conversation. What the dominator culture says is, you don't talk about this. For this week, Nazis are good. In a couple of weeks, Nazis will be bad again and we'll shut them down. Well, hold on. What I don't like is the yielding of authority. What I don't like is authoritarianism. And what I don't like is the total lack of values and principles at the core of this machine. This is Matt Taibbi, friend of the show. He says, Meta reportedly followed up their decision to unban the neo-Nazi Azov battalion with a mind-blowing decision to alter its hate speech policies to allow Facebook and Instagram users in some countries to call for violence against Russians and Russian soldiers in the context of the Ukraine invasion, according to internal emails seen by Reuters. I'm really sort of concerned about those companies and have been for a while, and I recognise the complexity of the fact that my information is conveyed to you via those companies, and that's the reality we find ourselves in. One of the regulations that I would have imagined could have been pretty consistent is anti-violent messaging. War is, of course, by definition, violence. So now discussion of violence has been permitted. I feel like it's an invitation to be even more critical of what their values and principles and governing ideologies are if they will change their policy to allow critique. Facebook are not going to impact the outcome of that conflict, but they will impact the conversation around that conflict. That's what's being controlled here. That's what's being controlled. These people are permitted to speak. We're highlighting that information. We're reducing that information. We're eliminating that information. They don't know what's right. They just know what's convenient to the pursuit of their agenda. So we're not even talking about what's right. We're talking about what's convenient to meet their objectives. We long ago reached the doublethink phase predicted by Orwell, where most of the population is conscious of double standards but ignores them effortlessly. I think we are aware of that now. What a genius Orwell was. We were caught up on the aesthetics, weren't we? The aesthetics suggested it would be a type of drab Eastern European communism that those of us that grew up in the 80s were familiar with. But actually what it's become is the saturating domination of linguistic management and technocratic authority. An authority that plants itself in your mind so you censor yourself, so you don't know who you are anymore. You are not allowed to communicate directly. The authority that I fear most is the authority that they're embedding in our consciousness right now. A healthy person should be able to be horrified by what's happening in Russia and also see a warning about the degradation that ensues from using preemptive force or from trying to control discontent by erasing expressions of it. Trying to control discontent by erasing expressions of it. But years of relentless propaganda have trained Americans to double-think their way out of such insights. The ideal citizen of Orwell's Oceania bubbled with rage a mile wide and a millimetre deep and could forget in an instant passions that may have consumed him or her for years. We just did this with a pandemic that had the country steaming with indignation until it was quietly declared over the moment Putin rolled over Ukraine's borders. We switched from the pandemic of the unvaccinated to Putin's price hikes in a snap. National outrage moved a few lobes over with zero fuss. And now we hate new people. Instead of anti-vax Barbie, we're barring Russian and Belarusian kids from the Paralympics. One of the things that terrifies me most is that the lens and glare of the machine is able to effortlessly shift. Where did it go? All of the concern around the pandemic, all the condemnation, all the pageantry around masks. Where is it now? Where is it? What's happened to it? And the only thing that remains is the criticism, condemnation of people that wanted an open conversation. And now that is applied to people that are trying to have a conversation around this conflict. No one, not Matt Taibbi in this article, not me in this video, not you in your heart, are saying that the suffering of Ukrainian people is anything other than horrific and sad. The problem comes when we have a machine, an apparatus wrapped around our public discourse, webbed to our minds, that prevents open communication for no reason other than it's inconvenient to its own agenda. Obviously, there was some kind of agenda at play during the pandemic. Obviously, there's some kind of agenda at play now. Because if there isn't, why are they working so hard to exclude honest and open conversation. A heartbeat ago, politicians and pundits all over were denouncing Canadian trucker protests over reports of swastikas. Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas, said Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This was despite the fact that even the fact-checking site Snopes concluded the photographed swastikas weren't expressions of neo-Nazi sentiment, but protesters comparing Justin Trudeau's government to Nazis. Isn't that just the kind of move they'd pull? Boo! Boo, you bloody Nazis! Look, swastikas! See, they are Nazis! And Nazis are bad! Facebook have just said Nazis are good. Well done, Nazis! Good work, Nazis! Hooray for the Nazis! What do we believe in again? Now the swastika in the Ukrainian context has been unbanned by Facebook. You can buy Azov Battalion mugs and t-shirts on Amazon. We can't let them win. We can't let them win. We have to set up an entirely separate parallel culture where open communication is possible because they are trying to saturate the world with bad ideas. In an effort to argue that Putin is worse than Hitler, we have people like Atlantic Council senior fellow Anders Asland, who sounds like he's from Narnia, saying Hitler had more arguments for his attack on Poland. Bloody hell, he's actually saying that Hitler's better. And former US ambassador and Stanford professor Michael McFaul saying on live TV that Hitler didn't kill ethnic Germans, German-speaking people. So these confusing statements, I guess, are saying that Putin's worse than Hitler. This isn't to say the Russian propaganda about denazifying Ukraine should be taken seriously. Yeah, that's another thing. So it's not like this. It's because what they assume is you can't have a conversation because you're too stupid. So just shut all conversation down. Because they think that you, I'm talking to you, won't be able to handle the idea that there are Nazi elements within Ukraine without going, oh, what, so like Russia then should be able to just do what they want. No. This isn't to say the Russian propaganda about denazifying Ukraine should be taken seriously, but it's amazing, isn't it, how quickly our conventional wisdom changes its stance, even towards something like neo-Nazism. An absolute one day, an Amazon impulse buy the next day. That's amazing. You can buy Nazi memorabilia freely on Amazon because there is no clear line on whether neo-Nazism is bad or not, according to the principles we are being invited to yield to. Moral panics erase memories. It's their primary function. Yes, I suppose when you're in a state of continual fear and panic, it's difficult to remain rational or at least clear. 9/11 wiped the national hard drive of everything from the Third Degree to the My Lai massacre to Operations Phoenix and Condor to the Church Committee to the School of the Americans to countless other shameless episodes and the lessons learned from them. The Trump-Russia scandal blotted out Snowden, made the spooks the good guys again. 2016 rehabilitated neoconservatives, now reinvented as never-Trumpers, cleaning away the shame of Iraq, Abu Ghraib, Afghanistan, etc. The misinformation panic wiped out the WMD fiasco, restoring honour to credentialed press. The DNC leak erased collateral murder. After George Floyd, we hated cops. After January 6th, we loved them. Ukraine now is openly being sold as a blue pill cure for everything that went wrong during the war on terror, including the recent defeat in Afghanistan. Realism is in disgrace, and leadership, regime change, and the universal appeal of freedom are back, only this time their primary backers are the upper-class cosmopolitan Democrats who marched against the simplistic freedom against evil plot neoconservatives tried to sell them 20 years ago. We're at the end of a 20-year cycle that has taken what was once the oppositional skeptic portion of the American population and seen them rallied behind the people they once hated the most. This has been accomplished by keeping us in a rage that always escalates and is never watered down by contradictions, thanks to the mastery of reality control, via an unending series of victories over your own memory. One of the things people talk about with social media is its ability to mine your attention and to control your behaviour. You can see now how the conversation in our culture is being used to manipulate being itself. Michel Foucault, a great French philosopher, pretty left-wing, talked about biopolitics, controlling life itself. Well, perhaps we've gone even deeper. Consciousness politics. What you're allowed to think, which I suppose is obviously an Orwellian idea, is being manipulated at scale. narratives continually changing, a bewildered population with no choice but to behave as a herd, no ability to trust your own emotion and your own instincts and your own life and your own community and your own values and your own tradition and your own history, because everything is changing all the time, because there are no clear values and principles. These are the only weapon we have against this war against our freedom, the cultivation of our own values and principles, and some, I might suggest, our tolerance of other people, a willingness to openly communicate and converse with people you disagree with, not entering into discourse with certainty, always knowing I might be wrong, I'm not sure, I don't know, what do you think, what do you feel, how can we do this together? I suppose then it is beholden on us to even have an open heart towards our oppressors, towards these censors, towards those that would never offer us the same freedom. I'm, of course, not saying the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not wrong. I'm not saying that I don't stand with Ukrainian people or acknowledge the horror that they are enduring. We're talking about something separate, distinct, but connected to this issue. The ability for people like you and me to speak freely, to communicate openly, to try to reach conclusions peacefully and not to be afraid of our own thoughts and our own minds. The relentless parade of panics listed above, just a small sample, we've had dozens just in the last few years, make those victories easy. And every time we switch targets from Russians to neo-Nazis to cops to transphobes to insurrectionists to the unvaccinated to truckers and back to Russians again, the church of forgetting picks up new converts. Now free speech and peace advocacy are universally understood to be stalking horses for fascism. Once Russia invaded Ukraine, the cultural vocabulary was whittled to one compound thought, approximately this: Putin is the ultimate evil, we hate him, war is good, and peace undesirable, even if necessary. It's all yet another expert wiping away of memories. Even when there's real fighting going on in a faraway land, the real target is always the domestic population, whose memories and doubts and distracting emotional attachments are the real threats and must be constantly policed. Wonderful writing there from Matt Taibbi. You might consider subscribing to him. What a brilliant writer he is. Personally, what it has evoked in me is the understanding that whilst there is very clearly a geopolitical military problem happening in Ukraine, it is a complex situation that involves neo-Nazis, history, resources, biolabs, NATO. The real focus should be ending the conflict. Should we agree on that? Providing a favourable outcome to the people that are in reality affected, Ukrainians, the many people in Russia who oppose this war and see it as imperialist and undesirable, the same as I do, the same as I assume you do, wherever you would have seen yourself on the meaningless political spectrum, because we know it's meaningless now, because it's ever shifting. Where my focus is, and where I invite you to put your focus, is on this attempt to control all discourse, not just involving this matter, because a couple of weeks ago it was something else. And in another couple of weeks, it will be another matter. And in another 6 months, something else. And each time our ability to communicate and to come together is being further eroded. The possibility that we might form our own communities and values and principles is being closed down. But there is a counter argument. Many of us can see what they are doing. Many of us understand the censorship, the dilution, the homogenization, not as being in the pursuit of some noble goal, but to be precisely the opposite. In point of fact, the real threat of fascism appears to be coming from those that most claim to oppose it. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. What do we do next? Where do we go from here? How do we continue to have conversations about complex ideas like this? How do we keep our public spaces free? How do we regulate conversation? How do we prevent ourselves being bludgeoned and cudgeled into idiocy by a machine that don't want me and you and me to be free? I don't know. Let's communicate it together. Give this video a like if you enjoyed this one. Have a look at this one or one of these ones. They're all fantastic. Maybe sign up to my mailing list. And remember, I'm all over the UK. You can come see me live. There's a link in the description. Stay free.